Hello, this is Tony Heller from RealClimateScience.com. Within hours of the Colorado fires, the ambulance chasers and the press were on the scene to blame it on climate change. They never miss an opportunity to use human misery as a way to push their agenda. I used to work in Louisville, Colorado, and I know several people who lost their homes in this fire. Climate alarmists have spent decades linking in the public mind that climate change means the burning of fossil fuels. YouTube typically contaminates my videos with this propaganda banner. The goal of this propaganda campaign isn't to help people, rather it's to demonize fossil fuels. Now let's look at what actually happened with these fires. A grass fire started south of Boulder. This is the bike trail which I used to commute on my way to work in Louisville, which is over the hill. There were very high winds blowing from the west, which isn't particularly unusual for Boulder. The grass fires blew across the open space into neighborhoods like this one. The highly flammable houses are built right next to each other in these neighborhoods. The high winds fanned the flames and the houses burned in succession from west to east. This house burned and it set the neighbor's house on fire. It became a domino effect throughout the neighborhood. The houses are built too close together. Amazingly though, one house survived. One of my bicycle commute routes took me right down this street. The trail I commuted on was between the grasslands and this neighborhood which burned up. 2 days ago, this house right here was valued at $1.3 million. My bicycle commute took me all the way across the burn area to work. If you've been following me for a long time, you might remember that in 2007, I filmed the birth and childhood of some Cooper hawks right here. This is one of them and a parent. The eggs don't all hatch at the same time. This baby was a few days old and this one hadn't hatched yet. They grow very quickly. This picture was taken only about 10 days later. They were incredibly cute, but they left the nest after only a few weeks. However, one of them did return to the nest in the fall to eat this mouse. Now let's look at the climate of Boulder. Boulder has gotten much snowier over the past century, and the number of snowy days has also greatly increased. And Boulder has been getting wetter. 2021 was actually above average precipitation. The number of wet days in Boulder has greatly increased over the past century. The winter of 2019-2020 was the snowiest on record in Boulder with more than 12 feet of snow. Now let's focus on the weather in Boulder from 2021. The first half of the year was one of the wettest on record in Boulder, and the number of wet days was very high as well. But the second half of the year was very dry for the second year in a row. The number of wet days during the second half of the year was the lowest since 1989. The very wet conditions during the first half of the year caused the grass to grow very tall. Last summer was the greenest I've ever seen the Front Range of Colorado. But the grass dried up in the second half of the year. The combination of tall dry grass, high winds, and high temperatures led to a catastrophic fire. The fire is believed to have been started by a power pole which blew over. North American autumn snow cover has been at record levels in recent years, but this past autumn was just barely above average. There was a lot less snow during the autumn this year in the United States than there has been in other recent years. There was a west to east flow of the jet stream, which is a typical weather pattern during La Nina. This pattern led to record December snowfall in California. But along the Front Range of Colorado, the same weather pattern causes warm, dry, downslope winds. Jeff Masters claims that these bouts of extreme weather are happening more frequently, but it simply isn't true. And Seth Borenstein claimed that it was rare to be able to ride a bicycle in December in Boulder. This also isn't true. Boulder is the #1 cycling city in the United States precisely because it's a great place to cycle year-round. The city plows the bike trails before they plow the roads. That's one of the main reasons why I lived in Boulder. They get a big snowfall in Boulder, and then typically a few days later, downslope winds melt the snow and it warms up. There were only 1 or 2 days when there was too much snow for me to commute to Louisville on my bicycle. I took this picture on a bike ride up the hill to the National Center for Atmospheric Research on December 29, 2019, during their snowiest winter on record. The weather pattern has changed. Now there's a big dip in the jet stream and there's lots of snow and cold along the Front Range. It's about 0 degrees Fahrenheit or minus 18 Celsius here in Cheyenne right now. The burn area has more than 6 inches of snow and it's very cold, compounding the misery of the people who lost their homes. Climate alarmists have been attempting to blame these dips in the jet stream on declining Arctic sea ice. This was their way of attempting to explain the increase in snowfall, which they'd predicted the exact opposite of. A 2015 study by Jennifer Francis at Rutgers University evidence for a wavier jet stream in response to rapid Arctic warming. That story doesn't work anymore though, because Arctic sea ice extent at the end of 2021 was the highest in 18 years. The Arctic melting polar bear drowning scam has completely fallen apart. Now let's look at the political aspects of this, which is the real problem that Boulder faces. Boulder has prided itself as being leaders in the fight against climate change for the past 15 years. But based on what happened this week, it's pretty clear that what they're doing isn't working. 4 years ago, Boulder shut down the West's largest coal-fired power plant. Here's a picture I took of the plant 2 years ago. They shut it down, but that didn't stop all the houses down here from burning up this week. Colorado is shutting down all of their fossil fuel power plants, like the Rawhide Generating Station north of Fort Collins. I took this picture on Valentine's Day 2021, which was the coldest day on record that late in winter. The recently installed solar panels, which destroyed lots of wildlife habitat, were covered with snow and were not generating very much electricity. At the same time, the massive wind farm over the hill in Wyoming was shut down as well. There wasn't any wind and the operators had to shut it down because of icing on the turbine blades. Northern Colorado was completely dependent on coal power, but the governor is shutting down this plant in a few years as well. On that same day in Texas, the wind turbines froze up and lots of people froze with them. Colorado is headed on a path to disaster by shutting down their fossil-fueled power plants. This article was in the Loveland, Colorado newspaper on February 16th of last year, 2 days after the big freeze. The plan to shut down fossil fuels is based on the belief that other states will be more responsible than Colorado. They're planning on being able to import fossil fuel-powered electricity from other states, which they're hoping will still be governed by adults. If neighboring states were as irresponsible as Colorado is, Colorado would have a huge problem on their hands. What Colorado is doing is complete insanity. Nobody died in the fires, but lots of people are going to die when it gets very cold after they shut their fossil fuels down. The idea that Boulder or Colorado could have any meaningful impact on the global climate is well into the realm of insanity. CO2 emissions in China have been skyrocketing as they've been declining in the United States. Even if you believe that CO2 controls the climate, the United States doesn't have control over it. North America and Europe are making themselves irrelevant. Even Biden's climate guy, John Kerry, admits that zero emissions in the United States wouldn't make a difference in climate change. China is bringing huge amounts of coal-fired power online, even as Colorado shuts theirs down. 3 decades of climate agreements have had no impact on the growth of CO2 in the atmosphere. The people in Boulder think they're saving the climate, but all they're up to is meaningless virtue signaling. The climate of Colorado is not survivable for humans without an adequate energy supply, and that's exactly the disaster which their government is creating. As a result of their superstitions about fossil fuels and climate, they're not going to have enough energy to keep their people alive in the future. 10 years ago, Donald Trump tweeted, "The concept of global warming was created by and for the Chinese in order to make U.S. manufacturing non-competitive." The governments of Colorado and Boulder in particular are being useful idiots for the Chinese. Toto escaped Boulder just in time to miss the lockdowns, the supermarket shooting, the fires, and the upcoming energy disaster which the government of Colorado is creating. Toto, Kyrie, and Caesar are very happy to be in Wyoming now. You can visit them on the web at realclimatescience.com.